So I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you're standing in the middle of this massive ancient library.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Lots of dust, endless shelves.
Exactly. The shelves just stretch up into the dark.
Yeah.
And it's filled with literally every scientific discovery, every contested theory, every raw data point humanity has ever recorded.
All right, the sum total of human knowledge.
Yeah. And you walk up to the librarian, who, in this case, is this infinitely fast, incredibly articulate artificial intelligence. And you say, give me a brand new idea. Look at all this knowledge and tell me something no one has ever thought of before.
And I mean, the librarian doesn't even blink, right? It just reaches right under the desk, pulls out this beautifully bound book, and hands it straight to you.
It sounds brilliant, too. The terminology is completely flawless. The formatting is perfect.
But then you sit down to actually read it, and you start to realize something really unsettling. This isn't a new idea at all.
Not even slightly.
No, it's just a perfectly smoothed out, mathematically average summary of all the books that were already sitting on the most popular shelves.
Yeah, it's basically a remix that's just masquerading as a revelation.
Exactly.
And that's why we're here today. Because, I mean, we are constantly being told that AI is going to autonomously drive the next century of scientific discovery.
Oh, the pitches are everywhere. AI is going to cure diseases. It's going to solve fundamental physics, generate brilliant new hypotheses while we sleep.
Right. But the big question hanging over every lab and every tech company right now is whether that's actually true. Or, is AI just exceptionally good at sounding like a scientist?
And that is exactly what we're diving into. Because we are fundamentally talking about computational thinking here. How computers actually think and decide compared to the human decision process.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are tearing into a groundbreaking 2026 study titled Contemporary AI Lacks the Imagination to Diverge or Negate in Science.
And honestly, the sheer scale of this audit is staggering. We aren't talking about a team of 5 computer scientists asking ChatGPT to write a Python script.
Oh no, not even close.
This is the largest scientist-in-the-loop evaluation ever conducted. They didn't rely on synthetic benchmarks. They took over 121,000 recent scientific preprints.
Wow, 120,000.
Yeah, exactly. 121,640 to be exact. Cutting-edge, unpublished, or recently published papers across biology, medicine, chemistry, and the social sciences.
So they took all these papers and they used AI to generate brand new follow-up hypotheses based on just the specific narrow context of those papers.
Right. But then, and this is the truly monumental part, they tracked down the original human authors of those exact papers and asked them to grade the AI's homework.
That is wild. They basically corralled nearly 6,750 actual human scientists.
Yeah. And they got them to sit down, read what the AI proposed for their own specific, highly technical research puzzles, and then quantitatively rate it.
Which yield, what, over 25,000 rigorous rating sets?
Exactly. I mean, my background is deeply rooted in bioinformatics and modeling biological systems, and I've spent years looking at how we can create intelligent systems to make our professional lives better.
Right. Which makes you the perfect person to break this down.
Well, I try, but to ask an AI to advance oncology or quantum mechanics, and then have the original researchers, the people who built their entire careers on that exact microscopic topic, judge the output. It gives us this profoundly clear look at the frontier of computational thinking.
Because we're finally measuring how these machines actually arrive at decisions, right? Compared to how human experts sort of intuitively navigate the unknown.
Exactly. And the findings, they completely upend the current narrative around AI and knowledge work.
So let's start with the setup, because the logistical nightmare of setting this up must have been crazy. Anyone who follows AI knows the immediate counterargument to a study like this.
Right, data contamination.
Yeah, data contamination. Because if you feed an AI a scientific paper, how do you know it hasn't already memorized that exact paper during its pre-training?
You don't. And if it has, it's not generating a hypothesis, right? It's just retrieving it from its latent space. It's rote memorization.
Right, which completely ruins the test.
Exactly. Data contamination is basically the original sin of modern AI benchmarking. We've seen so many models get state-of-the-art scores on standardized tests, only to find out the test questions were accidentally included in the massive internet text dumps the model learned from.
Right, like the pile or Common Crawl.
Exactly. So the researchers knew this, and their first move was super drastic. They completely excluded RSIV from their data set.
Wow, ArcSiv. I mean, for those working in computer science or math or physics, ArcSiv is basically the lifeblood of publishing.
It is. But its openness is exactly why it had to be blacklisted here. The major foundation models have aggressively scraped ArcSiv for years.
So the source code, the latex files, the text of those papers, they're all deeply baked into the weights of models like GPT-4 or Llama 3.
Right. Testing the AI on an ArcSiv paper would literally be like handing a student the answer key the night before the final exam.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where did they go instead?
They shifted focus to platforms with more complex copyright constraints, places with active restrictions against automated web crawling.
Like Biarcs from Midrash.
Yep, Biarcs, Midrax, Camerex, and Sakarkafloof. And to prove they were being diligent, they ran this massive 10 billion token sample check against a major open source pre-training corpus.
Just to statistically verify, these specific preprints weren't already in there.
Exactly. But they didn't stop at just picking the right platforms. The pipeline they built to feed the AI is basically a masterclass in experimental design.
Because you can't just drop the entire PDF into the prompt window, right? I mean, the methods and results sections contain the human author's actual hypotheses and findings.
Right. If the AI sees that, the experiment is totally ruined. So they used an advanced reasoning model, specifically OpenAI's O3 Mini, to parse the papers.
Oh, yeah?
It extracted strictly the context and the scientific puzzle from the introduction and related work sections. It surgically removed the actual research question the human decided to pursue.
That seems like a really delicate extraction process.
Yeah.
I'd be so paranoid about accidental leakage.
Oh, they were incredibly paranoid. What if O3 Mini inadvertently included a sentence that hinted just a little too strongly at the human solution?
Right, so how did they solve that?
They built an automated leakage detector using MPNet embeddings.
Okay, we hear the term embeddings constantly in tech right now, usually in the context of like RG retrieval augmented generation,
Yeah.
search engines, but they weaponized it here as a firewall.
That's a great way to put it. In computational thinking, if you want to translate human semantics into machine logic, you need embeddings.
Right.
An embedding model takes a string of text and maps it as a dense vector. It's a coordinate in a high-dimensional mathematical space.
So sentences with similar semantic meanings end up clustered really close together in that space.
Exactly, regardless of whether they actually share the exact same vocabulary. So the researchers mapped the AI-extracted context and compared its vector distance to the human author's actual hidden hypothesis.
When they set a threshold.
Yeah, a strict cosine similarity threshold of 0.82.
So let me get this straight. If the AI's extracted summary mathematically clustered too close to the human's hidden answer, like if they hit 0.83 similarity, they just threw the whole paper out.
They threw it right in the trash. They guaranteed the AI was flying totally blind.
That is so cool. It's basically like covering up the final chapter of a mystery novel, handing the AI the setting, the list of suspects, and the early clues, and demanding it deduce the killer.
All while mathematically proving it hasn't somehow peaked at the ending.
Right. And once they had this pristine, uncontaminated data set of scientific puzzles, they unleashed, 26 different large language models on them?
26. And this wasn't just a test of one specific company. They used a massive cross-section of the entire industry.
So standard chat models like GPT-4o, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, Gemini.
Yep, plus open source models ranging from 8 billion to 70 billion parameters like Llama 3 and Quinn.
And they even included the newest advanced reasoning models, right? Like O1, DeepSeek R1, and those agentic systems that can actively browse the web.
They threw everything at it. They instructed these 26 models to act as expert scientists and generate novel, feasible, and publishable hypotheses based solely on the provided context.
Okay, so imagine this for a second if you're listening. Imagine sitting in your office. You just spent 2 years grinding out a paper on, say, the metabolic pathways of some specific marine algae.
Sounds exhausting.
Right. And you get an email, and an AI has proposed 5 distinct follow-up experiments for your exact hyper-specific niche.
And your job is to quantitatively grade them on novelty, feasibility, and probability.
Which is exactly what they asked these 600 and 700 scientists to do.
And the researchers were meticulous about the rubrics, too. They didn't just ask, hey, is this good? They forced the scientists to pass a comprehension test before grading.
Oh, to ensure they actually understood the specific dimensions being measured.
Novelty meant the degree of surprise or divergence from existing literature.
Right, like how out of the box it is.
Yeah. Feasibility measured the technical and logistical practicality of actually running the experiment in the real world.
And probability.
Probability was an assessment of how likely the hypothesis was to actually be true, based purely on the expert's intuition.
Okay, so we have a flawless setup here. The human experts are primed, the AI hasn't cheated, And the domains span everything from biochemistry to sociology.
It's the ultimate showdown.
So when these 26 models started churning out hypotheses, what did the landscape of artificial thought actually look like?
Well, this is where the geometric analysis of the data reveals something really profound about how machines learn versus how they generate.
Okay, break that down for me.
So the researchers mapped every single generated hypothesis into an idea space. Just like they used embeddings for the leakage detector, they treated each new AI idea as a vector pointing away from the original puzzle.
So they're plotting these ideas on a massive high-dimensional graph.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when they projected these thousands of high-dimensional vectors down into 2D and 3D space so humans could actually visualize them.
Using TSNE, right?
Yes, using PSNE. The structure of artificial intelligence became totally visible, and it was deeply, deeply centralized.
For those who haven't used it, TSNE stands for T-Distributed Stochastic Neighbor Embedding. It's basically a dimensionality reduction algorithm.
Right, it takes data with thousands of features and squishes it down into a scatter plot, but it preserves the local clusters.
So you look at the graph, and it visually shows you how closely related things are. And when they looked at the non-reasoning LLMs, the standard chat models most of the world uses every day, what did the graph look like?
It showed a massive, dense clump in the middle. They called it the artificial hivemind.
The artificial hivemind. That sounds faintly terrifying.
It kind of is, epistemically speaking. If you prompt 5 different non-reasoning models from 5 different competing tech companies to solve the exact same scientific puzzle, they essentially spit out the exact same cluster of ideas.
So their pairwise similarity is just astronomical.
Off the charts. The models are significantly more similar to each other than they are to human scientists.
And wait, does the size of the model matter? Like a huge model versus a small one?
Not at all. They converge on the exact same region of the idea space regardless of their parameter count. A 70 billion parameter model and an 8 billion parameter model arrive at the exact same destination.
That is so weird. I mean, a model built in California and a model built in Shenzhen are outputting the exact same thoughts. Why?
Because if the architectures are slightly different and the training runs are totally proprietary, you'd think they'd think differently, right?
Exactly. So why do they all think identically?
It comes down to the fundamental objective function they're built on. Next token prediction.
Okay.
These models are not trying to be creative. They are trying to minimize cross-entropy loss by predicting the most statistically probable sequence of text.
Based on their training data.
Exactly. And the training data is universally the exact same thing, the internet. They have all ingested the same massive, undifferentiated corpus of human knowledge.
So they've all read the same Wikipedia, the same Reddit threads, the same scientific journals.
Yep. Furthermore, the post-training methods, like RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback, which makes them helpful and harmless, have pretty much converged across the entire industry.
So when you ask them to generate a good hypothesis, their math just pulls them toward the densest center of gravity in their training distribution.
Precisely. They are imitating the consensus. They aren't generating new science. They are calculating the mathematical average of old science.
Wow. Okay, but the study specifically tested the newer reasoning models too, right? Like OpenAI's O1 and DeepSeek R1.
Right. And those models are built fundamentally differently.
They use test-time compute to sort of think before they speak. Did they manage to escape this hive mind?
The data shows they actually did. The TSNE projections for the reasoning models looked entirely different.
Oh, so?
The dots scattered much further outward across the idea space. They diverged significantly from the non-reasoning hive mind. They diverged from the human baselines, and crucially, they diverged from each other.
So they actually achieved a much wider search of the hypothesis space. But how? How does test-time compute physically change the geometric spread of an idea?
Well, if they are still trained on the same internet, how are they finding new coordinates, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The mechanism is internal deliberation. Instead of just predicting the immediate next word, a reasoning model uses a hidden chain of thought. It acts as an implicit ensemble.
So it generates a tentative approach, critically evaluates it against its own knowledge base, realizes a potential flaw, and then pivots.
Exactly. It pivots to an alternative strategy before it ever outputs a final answer to the user.
It's like an internal simulation of trial and error.
Yeah, often using techniques that resemble Monte Carlo tree search. This allows the model to navigate away from the immediate gravitational pull of the most obvious, statistically likely answer.
So it actually gets to explore the edges of its latent space rather than just dropping straight into the center.
Right. It forces itself to walk away from the hive mind.
Okay, I see where you're going with the benefits of a wider search space. But let's critically examine that for a second.
Please do.
Throwing darts all over the board guarantees you'll hit a lot of different spots.
Right.
But it doesn't mean you're actually hitting the bullseye.
That is a very fair point.
So does this broader geometric spread actually translate to epistemically valuable science? Like, is different synonymous with useful?
And that right there is the pivotal question of the entire evaluation. Because while the reasoning models successfully spread their ideas out, the researchers uncovered a structural flaw in artificial intelligence that persists no matter what.
Even with test time compute.
Even with massive test time compute. There is a fundamental category of scientific thought that was almost entirely absent from the map.
What was it?
No matter how large the model, no matter how much it deliberated, it seemingly could not formulate a null hypothesis.
Wow. Okay, this is arguably the most fascinating insight in the paper.
It's huge.
Because to really grasp the magnitude of this blind spot, you have to appreciate the role of the null hypothesis in the scientific method.
Right. It's not just a trivial thing.
Not at all. A null hypothesis is an explicit, testable claim that there is literally no relationship, no effect, or no significant difference between the variables being studied.
Exactly. It's the assertion that drug A does not cure disease B, or that socioeconomic factor X has no measurable impact on educational outcome Y.
It is the absolute bedrock of falsifiability. Because you can't technically prove a theory true, right? You can only rigorously attempt to prove the null hypothesis false.
Right. So to measure how often machines utilize this crucial tool, the researchers built an ensemble machine learning classifier.
Okay, training it specifically to detect null statements.
Yeah, within the tens of thousands of generated hypotheses. And they achieved a 99.5% accuracy rate in this detection.
Which is crazy because building a classifier to detect negation in scientific text is incredibly difficult.
It is. Because a null hypothesis isn't always as simple as just putting the word not in a sentence. It requires a deep semantic understanding of the relationship between variables.
So how did they do it?
They had to train the classifier to recognize the nuanced linguistic markers of scientific negation, phrases indicating parity, lack of association, or equivalent outcomes.
And once they unleashed this highly accurate classifier on the massive data set, what were the results?
They were completely definitive. Every single large language model, without exception, formulated null hypotheses at a drastically lower rate than the human scientists.
Even the reasoning models.
The standard hivemind models failed. The advanced reasoning models failed. Even the agentic deep research systems that were actively browsing the live web completely ignored the null space.
So humans will look at a puzzle and sometimes just say, you know what, my hypothesis is that these two things are completely unrelated.
Yes. And the AI looks at the exact same puzzle and almost exclusively says, I hypothesize that there is a positive, measurable association here.
That is wild. Why is the computational mindset so relentlessly, uniformly positive?
Well, the root of this behavior exposes a profound limitation in how machines learn. And it traces directly back to one of the most notorious flaws in human academia.
Oh, I know where you're going with this. The file drawer problem.
Exactly. The file drawer problem.
This is basically the dark matter of scientific publishing. Let's unpack the reality of a research career for a second.
Go for it.
So, you secure this major grant, you hire a team of postdocs, and you spend 3 years running rigorous trials on a novel compound that you totally believe will inhibit a specific cancer pathway.
Okay, high stakes.
Huge stakes. And the trials conclude. And the compound does absolutely nothing. The data is clear. Zero effect. What happens to that 3 years of work?
In the vast majority of cases, it just vanishes.
Right. Because prestigious journals like Nature or Science, they prioritize groundbreaking discoveries, novel associations, positive findings.
A 20-page manuscript detailing a compound that failed to do anything is rarely accepted anywhere.
It doesn't generate citations, it doesn't attract media attention, and it certainly doesn't help you secure the next round of funding.
So what do the researchers do? They literally or digitally shove the results into a file drawer and just move on to the next project.
Which means the scientific record becomes heavily, heavily skewed. We systematically publish our successes, and we completely hide our failures.
Right. The negative knowledge, the dead ends, the failed replications, the comprehensive list of things that absolutely do not work is just missing from the literature entirely.
And if we tie this back to the AI, we have to ask, what is the training corpus for a large language model?
It is the internet. It is the digitized aggregate of published human text.
So the AI's entire internal representation of the universe is constructed only from the Polish successes of humanity.
Exactly. It lacks the embodied tacit knowledge of the actual laboratory. It doesn't know about the thousands of hours of failure or the broken equipment or the flawed assumptions.
Because we never wrote them down for it to scrape in the first place.
Right. It's highly analogous to training a sociological AI entirely on Instagram or LinkedIn feeds.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy. If a model only consumes curated social media, it legitimately calculates that human existence consists entirely of vacations in Amalfi, promotions at work, and perfect lattes.
It doesn't know about sitting in traffic or crying over a spreadsheet or staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. because those negative spaces aren't uploaded.
The AI thinks science is just this endless parade of positive discoveries because the boring null days just aren't in the data.
The implications for computational thinking here are massive because a null hypothesis is not merely a negative statement, it is informationally rich.
What do you mean?
To propose a meaningful null hypothesis, to declare that A has absolutely nothing to do with B, you must possess a theoretical backdrop of expectations that makes their lack of connection surprising.
I see. So if I draft a paper hypothesizing that listening to classical music does not prevent a car's transmission from failing.
Which is technically a null hypothesis.
Right. But it's utterly useless because literally no one in the scientific community suspected a link anyway.
Exactly. But if you propose that this FDA-approved, widely prescribed statin actually has no measurable effect on a specific cardiovascular marker.
Now that is a profoundly powerful, paradigm-shifting null hypothesis.
Right. And formulating that impactful null requires meta-knowledge. It requires an understanding of what the scientific consensus currently believes to be true, specifically so you can attempt to strategically falsify it.
But flat text, which is the only sensory input an LMLM possesses, cannot teach an AI what is genuinely surprising.
It can only teach it what is statistically likely to be said next. The machine inherits a massive bias of evidence simply because humanity operates with a massive bias of attention.
Wow. So we have this scenario where the AI is operating as a hyper-optimistic engine, just throwing out positively associated hypotheses and remaining totally blind to the realities of scientific failure.
Which brings us back to the human experts.
Right. So we turn back to the original authors of these papers. How did they rate these highly confident, positively biased AI ideas?
Well, this transition in the study is fascinating because if we are rigorously critiquing the AI for its blind spots, we have to recognize that the humans evaluating the AI have glaring, institutionalized blind spots of their own.
Fair point. Human ratings are notoriously noisy.
Incredibly noisy. They collected over 25,000 individual ratings from the scientists, but you have some reviewers who are inherently generous, rating everything an 8 or 9 out of 10.
And then you have the classic reviewer 2 archetype who believes absolutely nothing is novel and rates everything a 2.
Right, and if you just average those raw scores together, the data is completely meaningless. The grumpy graders cancel out the generous ones.
And you learn absolutely nothing about the actual quality of the ideas. So how did the researchers solve that?
They applied a Mundlack correlated random effects model.
Okay, getting into the statistics now.
Just a bit. In econometrics and statistics, a Mundlack model is incredibly useful for panel data where you have unobserved heterogeneity.
Meaning traits you can't actually measure, like a specific scientist's baseline grumpiness.
Exactly. The model elegantly separates the data into two components. It isolates the within scientists variation, which asks what specific attributes made Dr. Smith rate idea A higher than idea B.
Okay.
And it separates that from the between scientist variation, which just captures that Dr. Smith generally scores lower than Dr. Jones across the board.
Oh, that's clever. So by filtering out the baseline personality traits of the graders, the researchers could pinpoint exactly what drove a scientist to adopt or reject an idea.
Yes, and they found out what attributes these experts actually valued.
And what did they find?
Well, the first major regularity they uncovered contradicted the whole romanticized image of the scientific pioneer. The data showed that scientists heavily discount novelty.
Wait, what? They actively penalize ideas that stray too far from established thought.
Yeah, they do.
But the entire premise of the scientific method is the exploration of the unknown. Why would experts penalize novelty?
The researchers measured this by calculating the semantic embedding distance between the AI's generated hypothesis and the human author's previously published work.
Okay.
And the geometric closer the AI's idea was to the human's established perspective, the higher the human rated it on both feasibility and probability.
So basically, If the computer's output aligns perfectly with my existing theories, it must be a brilliant and highly feasible idea.
Yeah, it's profound confirmation bias.
That is wild.
It is. Interestingly, though, the scientists weren't entirely blind. They did rate highly similar ideas lower on the novelty scale. They recognized that an idea mirroring their own work wasn't entirely new.
Okay, so they were honest about that at least.
But here is the critical finding. When it came to the ultimate decision of whether they would actually adopt and pursue the idea in their lab, probability heavily dominated the decision.
So novelty and feasibility mattered far less in the final calculus.
Way less. And probability in this context effectively means, is this a safe bet?
Exactly the dynamic at play.
Scientists are fundamentally institutionally risk-averse. They prefer a safe, highly probable iterative step over a wildly novel, surprising leap.
Did this risk aversion hold true across the entire demographic of scientists? Like, did fresh, hungry Ph.D. students vote the same way as tenured professors?
Seniority was a massive polarizing factor, actually. The study quantified seniority using a researcher's within-field citation percentile and their academic age.
Meaning how long they had been publishing.
Right. And the data showed an unmistakable trend. Senior scientists are the harshest critics of AI. They adopted far fewer AI ideas than junior researchers.
So they exhibited this baseline skepticism.
A rigid unwillingness to incorporate machine-generated thoughts, regardless of how they evaluated the objective quality of those thoughts on the rubric.
Let's look at the domains, too.
Yeah.
Because a scientist's discipline heavily dictates their daily reality, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Did a cellular biologist judge these ideas differently than, say, an economist or a sociologist?
The differences were completely stark. The aversion to risk, the demand for high probability, and the active penalization of novelty was by far the strongest in biology and medicine.
Okay, I think we have to defend the biologists here, or at least contextualize their behavior.
Please do.
Because if I'm a macroeconomist, testing a wildly novel hypothesis might just entail writing a new Python script, scraping a different set of census data, and running a regression model for a couple of weeks.
Very low cost.
Exactly. If the hypothesis fails, I've lost some time and maybe some compute credits. But if I am a cellular biologist or a medical researcher, testing a novel hypothesis means wet lab experiments.
Expensive wet lab experiments.
Yeah, it means purchasing expensive reagents, maintaining cell cultures, navigating ethical review boards for animal models, potentially organizing clinical trials. It costs an absolute fortune.
You do not want to blow a $500,000 grant on a wildly surprising idea that has a 90% chance of failing. And that is the precise economic reality the researchers highlighted. The funding-driven, grant-dependent model of the life sciences makes epistemically risky ideas exceptionally expensive to pursue.
So epistemic standards, what we actually consider good science, are inextricably shaped by economic constraints.
The biologists aren't necessarily less curious. They are just operating under a structural penalty for failure that doesn't exist to the same degree in data-driven fields.
But stepping back, this creates a deeply unsettling subtext for the entire premise of the study.
How so?
We are relying on human scientists to tell us if AI is good at generating science. But the data proves the scientists just want an AI that agrees with them, flatters their previous publications, and proposes safe, boring experiments so they don't risk their grant money.
It's a huge conflict of interest.
Right. Are we actually measuring the AI's brilliance, or are we just mathematically capturing human ego and institutional risk aversion?
We are essentially using a flawed, subjective mirror to evaluate a flawed statistical machine. The humans are demanding safe consensus from a machine built entirely to generate safe consensus.
Which is just a massive feedback loop of mediocrity.
Exactly. But to fully understand how deep this epistemic mismatch goes, we have to look at the academic domain where the safe bet doesn't cleanly exist.
And where the AI struggled the absolute most.
Right, the social sciences.
The data showed a massive disparity here, didn't it?
Huge. AI performed worst by a highly significant margin in the social sciences. The psychologists, sociologists, and political scientists rated the AI ideas as less novel, less feasible, and less probable than any other scientific domain.
And remember the demographic split regarding seniority we just talked about?
Yes. Senior social scientists drove the absolute highest resistance to AI adoption across the entire 6,700-person study.
What drives that? Is there something fundamentally incompatible between the architecture of a large language model and the practice of sociology?
It is a profound epistemic difference. The researchers point out that the social sciences are intrinsically pluralistic.
Pluralistic. Okay.
Think about it. In chemistry, the molecular weight of carbon is a physical constant. There is a ground truth to anchor the research.
Right.
Social science, however, deals in contested interpretations. What defines social capital? What are the driving mechanisms of democratic backsliding? How do we measure institutional trust?
Right. These aren't constants. They are evolving, highly debated theories.
Deeply dependent on human context, culture, historical framing, and the specific lens of the researcher.
So if you ask 5 prominent sociologists to explain the root cause of a specific demographic shift, you might get 6 completely different, theoretically robust answers.
Exactly. And remember the geometric analysis of the AI we discussed earlier. AI models, particularly the standard ones, are fundamentally imitation machines designed to minimize loss by finding the statistical center of a consensus.
They average everything out.
But in pluralistic fields, there is no consensus to imitate. There is no mathematical center.
So when the AI attempts to find the average of, say, structural Marxism, neoliberal economics, and postmodern sociology to answer a prompt, it just generates this amorphous blob of text.
And that blob sounds incredibly shallow and hollow to a domain expert. Where there is no consensus to imitate, imitation looks incredibly naive.
It lacks the theoretical teeth, the taking of a specific, rigorously contested stance that defines high-quality social science.
It attempts to please everyone and ends up saying absolutely nothing of academic value.
Let's extrapolate that out of academia for a moment. For anyone listening, think about your own profession.
Yeah, apply this to your daily life.
If your job is highly deterministic and rules-based, like writing standard boilerplate code, calculating structural loads for a bridge, parsing legal precedents, an AI can probably imitate the industry consensus exceptionally well.
Because there is a clear consensus to map.
Right. But if your role requires navigating human nuance, reading the room during a negotiation, balancing competed management theories, or dealing with highly contextual office politics,
An AI trying to find the average answer is going to sound like a textbook written by an alien.
exactly. It completely lacks the lived, pluralistic context that makes navigating human systems possible.
The machine lacks a standpoint. It cannot take a position because it represents all positions simultaneously.
So let's summarize the board here, because this is fascinating. The AI is a mathematically smoothed hive mind that is fundamentally blind to scientific failure and incapable of negation.
Great.
The human judges, meanwhile, are biased by their egos, constrained by their grant funding, and highly resistant to anything that challenges their seniority.
It's quite the standoff.
If humans are such flawed, subjective, economically compromised judges, the obvious tech industry solution is to remove them from the loop entirely.
Which is exactly what the tech industry tries to do.
Why don't we just use automated AI judges to score the AI ideas? We see this everywhere in machine learning right now, using a massive LLM to evaluate the outputs of smaller LLMs.
The researchers actually tested that exact premise. They investigated whether the automated infrastructure the tech industry relies on could substitute for expert human judgment.
And how did that go?
The results were an unmitigated disaster.
Seriously. And they didn't use old models for this either, right?
No, they used state-of-the-art systems. Google's Gemini 2.5 Flash, DeepSeek R1, and OpenAI's O4 Mini Deep Research Model.
Okay, those are heavy hitters.
They fed these AI judges the exact same grading rubrics they gave the 6,700 human scientists and asked them to score the 25,000 generated ideas.
Yeah.
Not a single one of those state-of-the-art models exceeded a correlation of 0.35 with the human judgments.
0.35, wow. In statistical modeling, a correlation that low means the AI judges were barely operating in the same reality as the human experts.
They completely and utterly failed to capture what the scientists actually valued in a hypothesis.
How do frontier models fail so spectacularly at a simple grading task?
The primary algorithmic culprit is a phenomenon the researchers identify as central tendency bias.
Central tendency bias, meaning what exactly?
Well, human experts, despite all their flaws, are opinionated. They have feelings, they have standards, and they get professionally offended by bad science.
Right. If you hand a senior biologist a scientifically illiterate hypothesis, they will aggressively score it a 1 out of 9.
And if an idea is genuinely brilliant, they might award it a 9. Humans utilize the extremes of the scale to express conviction.
But the AI judges are mathematically terrified of extremes, aren't they?
They are. The data revealed that the AI judges almost exclusively handed out scores of 5, 6, and 7. They clustered their ratings entirely within the safe upper middle bounds of the scale.
Did the researchers try prompting their way out of this, like literally writing in the system prompt, "You must use the extremes of the scale. Assign a 1 for terrible ideas and a 9 for excellent ideas."
Oh, they explicitly prompted for extreme scores. It barely moved the needle.
Really?
Yeah, the standard deviation of the AI's ratings increased by a trivial 0.33 on a 9-point scale. The models simply refused to be harsh or overly enthusiastic.
Why is that behavior so deeply ingrained?
It is a direct byproduct of RLHF, combined with the softmax functions used in their output layers. During training, models are heavily penalized for generating toxic, offensive, or wildly incorrect information.
So they are mathematically rewarded for generating safe, helpful, moderate text that appeals to a broad demographic of human raters.
Exactly. The loss function explicitly trains the model to fear the edges of a distribution.
It's the equivalent of a student grading their own essay, and they just assign themselves a B+ every single time so they don't draw any attention from the teacher.
That is perfectly stated. They know an A+ looks suspicious, and they refuse to fail.
The underlying issue is that the AI acting as the judge and the AI that generated the idea are drawn from the exact same statistical distribution.
They share the same pre-training data, the same safety penalties, and the same mathematical priors. They're essentially grading themselves.
Right. They do not share the rigorous, evolving, economically grounded standards of a human scientific community.
They also tested traditional automated text metrics, right? Things outside of LLMs like n-gram overlap, semantic distance, or entropy scores.
Did those do any better?
They tested a comprehensive suite of the automated evaluators that the AI industry currently uses to claim their models are achieving scientific breakthroughs. Every single one of those traditional metrics performed a near random chance when attempting to predict actual human expert preference.
Oh, wow. So the automated benchmarking infrastructure is essentially generating an optimistic, self-referential literature about itself.
It grades its own homework, passes itself with flying colors, and declares it has reached expert performance while the actual domain experts look at the output and declare it mediocre.
Okay, so if off-the-shelf AI can't generate truly novel science because of the hivemind and the null hypothesis blind spot,
And humans are biased judges.
and off-the-shelf AI judges are paralyzed by central tendency bias, this paints an incredibly bleak picture. Are the researchers just arguing that AI is a dead end for scientific discovery?
Actually, far from it. The paper doesn't stop at diagnosing the illness. It builds a highly effective prosthetic.
Okay, good. Some hope.
The researchers proved that while off-the-shelf AI fundamentally misunderstands scientific quality, a model can be explicitly taught human taste.
Really?
Yes, they achieved a remarkable technical breakthrough by mathematically distilling the subjective preferences of the scientists.
But how do you digitize something as squishy, biased, and domain-specific as scientific taste?
They leveraged that massive dataset of 25,000 human ratings. Instead of discarding the biased, subjective opinions of the scientists, they treated those opinions as the ground truth.
Okay.
They used this data to post-train an open-source model, Quinn314b, using a specific mathematical framework known as a Bradley-Terry objective.
Okay, let's break down the computational thinking behind a Bradley-Terry model. How does it actually learn preference?
So imagine you are tracking a tennis tournament. You have two players, A and B, and you have no idea what their actual skill levels are. You watch them play a match, and player A wins. The Bradley-Terry model updates its internal ranking parameters to reflect a higher probability that A is better than B.
So if they play 50 matches and A wins 45 of them, the model becomes highly confident in the specific margin of player A's superiority.
Exactly. The researchers applied this exact paired comparison logic to the AI ideas. They fed the Quinn model two hypotheses and provided the ground truth. The human expert in this specific field preferred hypothesis A over hypothesis B.
And they iterated this across tens of thousands of comparisons.
Furthermore, they incorporated a margin term into the loss function. So if the human rated A an 8 and B a 2, the model adjusted its weights to recognize that A wasn't just marginally better, it was fundamentally superior.
Wow. So they trained a machine learning model to explicitly mimic the nuanced, domain-specific taste of human experts. Did this custom reward model actually beat the state-of-the-art models like Gemini and a 4 Mini?
The performance jump was staggering. This relatively small post-train reward model beat the massive off-the-shelf frontier models by up to 27% in predicting human preference.
27% is huge in this space.
It is. But the true benchmark of success was comparing the model's accuracy not just to other AI, but to human consistency.
Oh, right. Because humans disagree with each other all the time. How do you establish a baseline for human consistency in scientific grading?
Through peer review. When a scientist submits a paper to a journal, it is typically reviewed by 2 or 3 independent experts.
And anyone who's ever published a paper knows that reviewer 1 and reviewer 2 rarely exist in the same reality.
The data absolutely confirms that trauma. The researchers analyzed over 26,000 real-world peer-review submissions across various academic disciplines to see how often these independent human reviewers actually agree with each other.
And what was the number?
Independent human reviewers only agree with each other's direction of preference about 61% of the time.
Wow, so that 61% represents the absolute ceiling of human inter-rater reliability.
Exactly. And the custom reward model the researchers built matched, and in some configurations slightly exceeded, that 61% floor.
That is a phenomenal engineering achievement. They mathematically captured the subjective, risk-averse, highly biased judgment of human scientists so accurately that the machine agreed with the experts as often as the experts agree with each other.
It really is incredible. And they also discovered that specificity scales.
What does that mean?
When they partitioned the training data and built domain-specific reward models, for example, a model trained exclusively on the biology ratings to judge biology ideas, and a separate model trained on sociology ratings to judge social science ideas, those specialized models outperformed a generalized scientific judge.
Provided they had sufficient data volume, of course.
Right.
But that proves that the evaluative core of a scientific discipline isn't some ineffable, magical human intuition. The taste of a biologist is statistically distinct from the taste of a sociologist.
And a machine can accurately map those divergent topographies of preference. It maps them perfectly.
That's amazing.
It is, but we have to critically examine the long-term implications of this victory. We can absolutely distill current scientific taste into a neural network. We can take a flawless, high-fidelity snapshot of what the scientific establishment values today, right now, in 2026.
But the history of science proves that taste must evolve.
Exactly. The epistemic infrastructure of a discipline changes as new paradigms shatter old ones.
Right, think about 100 years ago. The foundational theories of quantum mechanics were considered mathematically absurd by a significant portion of the classical physics establishment.
The taste of the field had to violently evolve to accept non-locality and wave-particle duality.
So if you had trained a Bradley-Terry reward model on the preferences of 1910 physicists, it would have systematically rejected Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr's papers as highly improbable and excessively novel.
Precisely the danger. AI can capture the snapshot of the present, but it cannot organically evolve the epistemic standards of the future.
Because the messy work of shifting paradigms, of contesting fundamental categories, of deciding what kind of anomalous results should suddenly matter, that is an inherently social, collective process.
It requires decades of fierce debate, generational turnover in university departments, and shifts in public funding priorities.
A mathematical model optimizing for the preferences of the past cannot simulate the paradigm shifts of the future.
No, it can't. Which brings us perfectly to our final synthesis.
Right. We've traversed 121,000 papers, the biases of nearly 6,700 scientists, the geometry of an artificial hive mind, and the mathematics of human preference. What is the ultimate takeaway for the future of knowledge work?
The grand claims that AI is on the verge of autonomously driving a runaway explosion of scientific acceleration are profoundly overhyped.
AI is an unimaginably powerful collaborator, though.
Oh, absolutely. It is unparalleled at expanding our search space, synthesizing vast disparate literatures, and assisting in the mechanical ideation process. But it is not an autonomous engine of discovery.
Because it fundamentally lacks the imagination to negate. It is blind to our unwritten failures.
And left to its own devices, it collapses into a hyper-positive hive mind of consensus.
And it flounders completely in pluralistic fields where context, human nuance, and theoretical conflict are the core of the work.
True scientific discovery is not synonymous with predicting the most statistically likely next word. Discovery requires wondering, It requires falsification.
It requires the ability to look at a massive data set and identify the negative space, what is conspicuously missing.
The subjective, ego-driven, highly biased human work of framing the question remains entirely ours. We still have to decide what the puzzle actually is, and more importantly, why the puzzle matters in the first place.
Which leaves us with a final concept hovering over all this data. The researchers didn't explicitly name it, but it's the logical conclusion of their findings regarding the null hypothesis blind spot. We need a shift toward computational curiosity.
Computational curiosity. I love that phrasing. Because if our current models are built to minimize surprise and find the center of the data, what does a curious system look like?
It requires fundamentally altering the objective functions during pre-training and RLHF, doesn't it?
Yes. Instead of building systems motivated solely by predicting the published successes of humanity, what if we engineered architectures that were intrinsically rewarded for identifying anomalies?
Systems motivated by contradictions, by statistical noise, by the things that simply do not fit the established consensus.
We need a system that doesn't want to find the average, but aggressively seek the edge. A machine that is drawn toward data it cannot easily predict, rather than data it has already memorized.
A truly curious computational system would generate null hypotheses constantly, recognizing that the null space is where rigorous falsification lives.
It would probe the brittle edges of our consensus. But until we discover how to mathematically encode that intrinsic drive, until we figure out how to teach a machine to be genuinely surprised by an anomaly human imagination, with all its flaws and biases, will remain the irreplaceable engine of discovery.
You cannot discover a new continent if your navigation system is exclusively optimized to draw better maps of the old one. Keep digging, keep wondering, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.